So my name is Carlos Walker. This is Art and Hustle, Black Authors Matter. And today I have Miss Dr. Nika White. How you doing, Miss White?
I'm doing very well, Carlos. Thanks so much for having me. I hope you're doing well.
Oh man, life is perfect.
I love that response.
Hey, all you gotta do is if you look at it, everything works itself out.
Yes, everything works itself out. And we need that type of positive energy right now with all that's going on in the world. So thank you.
Hey, it's gonna work itself out. We don't
It's
think
going to work
so,
itself out.
but if you believe in God and you have looked at your life from past to present, what you'll realize is there was chaotic moments that seemed chaotic, but they was building you. And
Yes,
if you can just know that I'm being built in the midst of this, what happens is you get to expect a better outcome.
yeah. I'm a believer. I'm totally aligned with that message. God is totally in control. He is ordering our steps. And so no matter what we see, even if it feels like chaos, he is totally in control. So I appreciate that.
Hey, Jeremiah 29:11 says, I know the
I know the
plan
plans
I
I
have
have for
towards
you.
you, not to harm you, but to prosper you and give you an expected end. Life, he lets you know then that this is not to harm. It's gonna feel like it
Yes.
because that's the reason why it's there. That whole phrase is there. But what happens? I need you to know that there's an prosperity and an expected end on
Yes.
the end of what you're about to go through. So the way I look, this is going to be our best 4 years. Yet you just got to believe it.
Absolutely. I'm totally right there with you. I'm loving this energy, by the way.
Hey, thank you. So, if you will, share a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Sure. So I am Dr. Nika White. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I am the proud founder and lead principal consultant for NWC, which is a full service boutique management consulting firm under my brand name, Nika White Consulting, which is why it's NWC for short. And we intersect the work of diversity, equity, and inclusion, belonging, justice, all the things, right, that fit under the broad umbrella of DEI. We intersect those constructs with leadership in business, working with all types of clients, different industries, different sectors and sizes, really helping them to integrate into their business framework, strategic diversity, intentional inclusion, and a lens of equity, so that we all can have opportunities for success.
Hey, one, thank you for the work that you're doing
Thank
because
you.
it's important.
Thank you.
Um, Inclusion, being able for people to strive in a society that doesn't always like them, whether it's black immigrants, no matter what form it is
Yes,
important
it
because technically this has been, how can I put it, a white man's world.
is. Very much so. Very much so.
And white men are scared right now that their world is crumbling. And it's not crumbling, it's just being restructured. Their
Yeah.
system worked perfectly. It ain't nothing wrong, ain't nothing broke about their system. I can promise you that. However, there's a new system that is being put in play and they feel weak.
Yeah. And I would venture to say, Carlos, that there is something wrong and broken with their system, because their system was not built with any of us in mind. It was built
No, that's
deliberately
what
with them in mind. So to them, in their minds, yes, it's not broken.
no,
But to
that's the
all
reason
the
why
rest of
I
us
said
who are in the margins, it is not working, and not working well at all. And so, yeah, that therein comes the work that I do and so many other practitioners in this space.
that's the reason why I said what I said. It worked the way they created it to work. It's
Yes,
not broken. Not at all. It's broken to us because it was never created for us,
never
but the
created.
system is a well-oiled wheel that is working perfectly the way they that created it to be.
Yeah,
What we're about to do is just reinstitute a new system that will be a well-oiled wheel and created for all, not just one. So, if you will, share about your one why you created your book.
sure. So, my book, which is, by the way, book number 3, it's called Inclusion Uncomplicated, a transformative guide to simplify DEI. And it was released in January of 2 years ago. So my book baby is 2 years now, and it was in partnership with Forbes Books. And the impetus for writing Inclusion Uncomplicated is because as a practitioner in this space, I found myself in so many conversations with organizational leaders who were having a hard time engaging meaningfully and effectively in the work of DEI simply because it felt so daunting. They were, in essence, Carlos, afraid of the conversation. They were afraid of saying the wrong thing, getting it wrong, not fully understanding it. And when we think about the resistance that was very present, it was all because it felt too complex and we needed to uncomplicate it. So I wanted to write a book that would help increase people's comfort level with engaging in this work so that they could sustain the work, be effective in the work. And it starts with just helping them to break it down into smaller bites so that it doesn't feel like it's something that cannot be attained. And I believe that a lack of clarity is part of the resistance. So my goal with this book was to let's bring the clarity. Let's help people to understand that while this work of diversity, equity, and inclusion, it can be complex, it doesn't have to be if we have a strategy for how to go about it. And so that is the impetus for why I wrote this book.
Thank you for creating that. You also said that you had two other ones, so we'll get to them in a minute. Because
Well, this is
this,
the most recent one. So, and a lot of the themes in the other two books, also kind of found its way into this book. And so I'm happy to spend our time talking about Inclusion Uncomplicated.
it sounds like this is the baby or the one that's dear because of I guess the evolution of it. Because you said
Yes.
the other
I
two.
grew as a writer. I grew as a practitioner. There were so many experiences, from a world perspective that we were exposed to. And I think all of that learning certainly produced a really rich product that I often find that I talk about this book more than my other two books, but also because of the recency of it. It's just 2 years old, but it's a practical guide. As I was writing it, I wanted people to see this as a resource and a tool, something that could be placed on their desk and revisit it from time to time. I wanted people to have, portions that were highlighted. I wanted notes in the margins. I wanted people to see this as almost like a blueprint or a guidebook for how to go about doing the work of diversity, equity, and inclusion effectively. So one of the things I love about it, Carlos, is that at the end of every chapter, there is a chapter summary. And then there's also critical reflection that gives people a way to engage and process the information that they read, right? How do they feel about it? What are some ways they can apply the information to their leadership and the respective environments they might find themselves in? And I have heard from so many over the past 2 years since the release of Inclusion Uncomplicated that it has done just that, is help them to unravel the knot that binds humanity together. And that's part of the metaphor that I use throughout the book is how do we unravel this big ball of yarn, which looks like a big mess, which can be very daunting. But if we unravel it piece by piece at a time, we're able to really get to the crux of what's most relevant and important. And that is what focuses us on how to then create the change that our society deserves and wants.
Or, as your title said, make it uncomplicated.
Yes, that's uncomplicated.
The most when you do things, or matter of fact, I read a book and the book actually said, if I cannot engage you or get you to the point of where our conversation is at, because it sounds like either my words are too big or I am complicating it and you don't understand it, it's not your fault.
Right.
It is my fault being the person who is communicating something to
Yes.
you to simplify it to the most simplest
Yes.
point where you can say, oh, that's what he was talking about.
Know your audience, make it plain, get down to their level, and when we show up to these conversations being so overly scholarly to where people walk away confused, then they're going to resist. They're not
Mhm.
going to engage because there is this fear of getting it wrong. And I'm also reminded that we do live in what's referred to as the council culture. If people do not say the right thing in the right way, then there are pockets of individuals that will literally cancel them. And I think that we need all of us to be on this journey of working for equity and full opportunity for success for all in order for us to realize and manifest that. So I am not about the council culture. I am about really trying to make this work accessible to all by helping to uncomplicate
And I like the fact that you're working to simplify.
it. Thank you.
We as we as humans, back to your analogy, we as humans look at the big ball of yarn and say, "Oh, this is too much."
100%.
And instead of just, "Hey, this is how you gonna do it." Figure out where to pull the thread out one by one. It's not You're not gonna do it all at one time.
Right.
That's how you really get knots.
Yes, absolutely. And this work belongs to all of us. I think that there's some people who are of the persuasion that only the chief human resource officers or HR leaders or the chief diversity officers are the only ones that need to be responsible for helping to
Mhm.
manifest diversity, equity, and inclusion within different workplace environments. And that is not the case. This work belongs to all of us. We each have a part. And I think that was really also an important message that I wanted to amplify through this book.
I was just about to ask you to give me your favorite part of the book.
Ugh, there's so many. I love the practicality of it. I will say though that just because I've been on this wave now since maybe the last of 2024, and it certainly has carried through to now where we are in 2025, and that is all about the power of storytelling and how storytelling is one of those ways to uncomplicate inclusion, simply because when we tell stories, Carlos, we get proximate to one's lived experience. We're
Mhm.
able to deepen our empathy and our compassion. We're able to feel with people, which is what empathy is all about. And through that, we are building bridges of divide by creating those connection points that allows us to see people as human. When people are sharing stories, they're using feel words, right? And when we connect with those feel words, we begin to also take on somewhat of their pain and their burden. And when you get to that place, it is hard for us to not care. It is hard to hate up close, right? So I love the proximity that storytelling creates. And it is something that all of us can contribute to this broad body of work of equity and inclusion and belonging, simply because we all have stories. We
Mhm.
all can talk about ways in which we felt like insiders or outsiders, or ways in which someone showed up for us that made us feel seen, heard, and valued and protected. And so those stories are really powerful. And I tend to gravitate to that particular chapter as one that I can say is maybe one of many favorites.
So I'm going. Matter of fact, I got a Bible verse for that. It says, "And they overcame by the blood of," is Revelations 12:11, "and they overcame by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony." Their
Yeah.
stories, because what happens is how you get over something. For those who believe in God, I wouldn't know that God did any, or you wouldn't know God did anything for me unless I told
Yes.
my story. But
Yes.
to your point, I wouldn't know that you may have been a little kid that had been picked on, and outside of the spectrum, unless you shared that. And that is
Absolutely.
the story of DEI.
Yes. And it takes vulnerability, right, to share those stories. And so I think that the more we can normalize storytelling, the more that people will become,
Empathetic.
accustomed to sharing those stories, right? It will give them permission to also feel safe to share their stories. I think about the way that you and I connected in this conversation at the start. We were talking about all that's going on in the world, and you drew upon your faith and you shared a scripture with me. And as a woman of faith and a devout Christian, that really resonated. And so automatically there was a connection point. And then we just really started vibing. And so that is a small example of just how powerful storytelling can be when we allow ourselves to unveil things about us that helps people to understand how we show up to the world, how we think, how we believe, how we interact. And so I am a big fan of building a storytelling culture into organizational frameworks, because sometimes I think that while we share personal narratives quite often, we aren't as intentional about creating and building into the operations and the DNA of an organization or a workplace storytelling culture. And I think that's something that will serve us well if we could get more organizations to think more intently about that.
It's what I like to say, especially in the Black society, it's what we were built upon.
Yes,
Most of
100%.
most of our culture is built upon oral stories,
Yes,
and not always written down. But now that we are writers and that we do have a part of that culture now too. What happens is, especially in America, make sure I state that right, because before
yes,
America, it was people who did literature and things. In
yes,
America, we did not know this language, so
yeah,
the people that was brought here couldn't speak nor do in this language. And
right.
what happens now, because we are writers, readers, we're able to share it in a different, not just orally, even though orally to me is still important,
Yes, it is.
because you have to be able to paint that picture. If you can paint the picture for a person, it does something totally different. To me, I think we ought to even bring art into DEI, because the thing about it, artists can literally paint the picture.
It is a form of storytelling. Absolutely. Absolutely. I started every chapter of the book of Inclusion Uncomplicated with a short story. And I did that simply because I wanted to help people to get into the mindset of
Hmm.
what I was about to share in that chapter, to really drive the points home. And so to your point that you just shared, storytelling can come in so many different capacities. It could be a form of art. It could be just verbalizing and socializing our stories. It could be, writing something, writing a piece. Maybe it's a poem, but poems tell stories. So there's so many ways in which I think that we can align our personal style to be able to tell a story that can create such great power in, again, building and bridging that divide that can exist among difference.
And to be honest, it's just that, it's a divide of people not under. There used to be, I think it was in West Virginia. It was two different clans, uh, white community, and I forgot the name of them, but something happened that started an argument, and they went on for years, and started was having confusion, because guess what? They never came and had a conversation. Whether
Yes.
you believe left or right, left and right have uh, validity to it.
Yep.
However, until you come together and have a conversation, whether I like what you're saying, whether I have to sit and deal with it, let's spark the conversation.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, you keep the divide there. And to your point, through storytelling, we get both sides, and we get to say, oh, you know what? I do see your point. You are human, and
Yeah.
we get to bridge the divide different.
Yes, it centers humanity. It allows for us to directly experience that the person that is seated across from me is a human. And when we can place emphasis on that, I think that automatically opens up a world of opportunity for us to be able to support each other in much more meaningful ways. And so, yeah, this is really important, context for me as well, because I realize that telling stories is not something that comes easy for everyone. And when we
Mm.
think about just this whole notion of being upskilled around effective communication, part of what I talk about in the book in one chapter is how do we navigate difficult conversations? Because conversations of difference, equity, and inclusion, they can become very divisive because we all have different point of views as to what that looks like in practice. But again, if we can focus on humanity, I think that it creates an opportunity for us to be much more open minded. And when that's the case, we're open to learning and hearing different perspectives. And the reality is that two truths can exist at once when you're talking about two different individuals in their walk of life, right? What's true for one person may very well not be true for another person for their lives, but that
Mhm.
is where the difference comes in. And difference is not necessarily bad or wrong or inferior. I think that we classify difference as bad and wrong. rather we should just classify it as a point of respect in which two individuals differ, and there's power in all of that.
To your point, there's two sides to every coin.
Yes.
And I know heads and tails exist,
Yes.
but it's the one that I focus on that I
Yes.
see, because I cannot see both at the same time. But
Absolutely.
I can have a conversation and know that, okay, your side is how you see, how you visualize and see life. Mine is
Absolutely.
how I visualize and see life. And to your point, both sides can be true. But
Absolutely.
what I need to know now is, how do we coexist with them
Yes.
being true and make this
Yes.
thing?
Yes. How do we value and treat that difference as opportunity and not as obligation, right? And I think that's so critical. I love your analogy. And it reminds me of actually a metaphor that my therapist has often used to illustrate the point of two truths being able to exist at once. And she says, I could be standing on one side and another person could be standing on the other side. And let's say what's in the center is the number six. Well, from my vantage point, it is a six, but from another vantage point, it could be a nine, right?
Mhm.
And so, again, we have to just make sure that we are open minded and we are willing to engage with open mindedness and curiosity as we're learning about others who may be different from us.
hmm And you're gonna get, in the beginning of every conversation, there's gonna be some fight back. Can you go get past emotion? To me, you have to get past my emotions to get to
Yeah.
that. Because first thing that, especially us, we have had a rather peculiar history here in America.
Yes.
Not all bad,
Yes.
not all good, and that's because for you and I, believers, we know that God takes all things and make things work for our good.
Yes. Work for our
Whether it
good.
was left and right, it got us here. And where we're at today is not where our ancestors were, but we're in a different position, in different place to change the world.
It's true. And those experiences matter. Again, to the scripture you were just quoting, all things work for the good for those who love the Lord and are called according to his purpose. And so, while it may be heavy for us to, especially during Black History Month, which is when we're recording this, for us
hmm
to really reflect on our ancestors and the historical lived experiences that they had as they stood and they served and they sacrificed and they suffered. That is, while it's painful maybe to recall and to think about, it was necessary. It was necessary, and it was allowed by God, for us to be able to get to the place where we are today. And I feel like, he is taking us into a different but a very similar experience with what we're seeing happening in the world right now. And I honestly, Carlos, I don't see how people can keep a level of sanity without being drawn to their faith, because it is feeling very chaotic, and it is feeling very uncertain, and that drives a lot of anxiety, right, and depression, and it really activates our nervous system in so many different ways. And if you aren't really grounded in a way that helps you to maintain a certain level of centeredness, then we're going to find that even more so, the mental health issues are going to be in overdrive, and people are going to experience a lot of, illnesses that are a result of stress related, diseases and other elements. And so I'm a big believer that we have to also think about the importance of self-care in this moment. And I talk about that as well in my book, because we are all have to really assess our own individual emotional capacity for what we can and cannot do, and then allow that to help protect our peace while we're yet and still trying to find where we can have impact within the spheres of influence that we carry.
What I learned is, we don't know what we can or can't do.
Yes.
A balloon is just a balloon until you put air in it.
Yes.
And we are balloons that truly, technically don't have a breaking point
Yes.
if you know that you are created for purpose. When
Yes.
you don't know that you have purpose, you do have a breaking point because you have not tapped in to understand the power that you have within, and you're being stretched for a reason.
Yeah, absolutely.
And what we're going as a community, if you ask me, like I shared with you, this is going to be the best 4 years yet. I have not seen this community lose at all. From when I did 3.5 years of studying Black history before I started doing the artwork and writing my book.
Mm,
And what God showed me was, to your point earlier, you said that basically everything was necessary to
yeah.
get it here. The reason why you got, and being that this is Black History Month, the reason why you got a light was because of Lattimore, and that filament that he put in it, it made the light last longer. The
Yeah.
reason why you got a lawnmower, a motor, uh, most of the things that we have touched and seen that exist, the cell phone, the GPS, certain video games, anything that you can almost think of, the countertop in a store, is
Yes.
because Black people went through and added value to this whole society that we call America or the world. You remove us, this is a dark place. But because of our ingenuity, we would have never touched the space without the women that did in Hidden Figures.
Right.
And when now we did this without being able to read and write, most of the people that create.
That part.
It's common sense or God sense that
Mhm.
we have, not book sense. There was people who could read books and won't create nothing. Unfortunately, look, they mind wasn't clicking. We are a different breed of people. While all people have great things, we are for a reason.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, those who don't want to accept that we have did some phenomenal stuff because they wasn't taught right either. They wasn't taught that we created all this stuff. They wasn't taught with the sense that we have now, that we can go find this stuff and be like, oh look, man,
Yeah.
we are in an age or in a bracket where God is revealing some stuff because, like, to your nature, I mean, to what you said, we're going somewhere
Yeah.
greater. So
Yeah.
be
We will not let
encouraged.
them erase us. We will not let them erase us. Yes.
They didn't create Black History Month. You cannot erase Black History Month because guess what? When God starts revealing the things, it's there so then all can see. What
Yeah.
we are doing now are only things that our ancestors already had in them, and we carry that same DNA of greatness to be able to do the same thing. You're doing it with your books. You're doing it with your speaking. You're helping change the world because you chose to use what God had you to do. And you brought up that verse. It says, "And we know
Yes.
that all things work together for the good of those who love God and are called according to His purpose." You were
Mhm.
called for this purpose here. You wasn't meant to be in the 70s, 60s, and back.
Yes.
You
We
was
were meant
called
to
for
be here
now.
right now for such a time as this. Yes.
And when you learn that, for that reason, that's the reason why I like to say God allowed me to come up with this idea, interview Black authors last year, and I did 29.
Good for you.
This year, I've done almost 28. I think it's going to run over, and I'm just going to start putting two up a day. But I am grateful to see where we are at today.
Awesome.
I like to say that our ancestors are rolling in their grave with joy. Joy in knowing that I couldn't write nor read, but you can.
Yeah.
And you're changing the world through it.
Hmm.
And for me, I'm just grateful to be in your presence, to be in the other
Thank you.
authors' presence, because if we knew who we were, it will blow your mind. We are still evolving. This is just, I'm 43. Don't know how long I will live, hopefully to 80, but I don't know who I'm becoming.
Mm-hmm.
God does. He knows the end from the beginning. He knows the butterfly. while he's watching the caterpillar.
Yeah.
And that's what you have to know. You have to know that we're in a different season because, hey, we special and don't even realize how special. So, with that, I do want to ask you a few last things. I would love for you to share a word of wisdom for somebody who just need it. I normally say whether they have been where you are at, whether they're creating a book, never create a book, they're trying to figure out what their purpose is. Give them a word of wisdom, and then let people know where they can find your book.
Yes, absolutely. So first, thank you so much, Carlos, for having me, and I appreciate the work that you're doing to amplify the written words of so many Black authors because sometimes we are overlooked, and so thank you for what you're doing. So a word of wisdom. I think I would go back to this notion of the power of community. I think that right now, when we find ourselves so challenged by the uncertainty of what's happening in the world, particularly around the political landscape, I think that finding security and protection with people who we know are going to keep us safe, who we know have our best interest at heart, who we know can pour into us and we can reciprocate that, and who we know can be sounding boards and thought partners. That is so critical. One of the ways in which I have been navigating is staying close to pockets of community that I have a strong sense of connectivity with. And I think that is something that we all should really be thinking about during this time. So, in terms of where you can find my book, anywhere where you like to purchase your books, Amazon obviously is a great choice and option because it's easy. But I know that a lot of people these days are focused on how do we get to any Black, bookstores, Black-owned bookstores, and other places that would make better sense as we are navigating a lot of news that's coming our way around different brands. But anywhere where you like to purchase your books, I've been fortunate to where through the partnership with Forbes Books, I have my books that's been placed in all the major bookstores. And so it's available in hardback copy, paperback, which I just released actually earlier this year in January 2025. And it's also available in Kindle. Or any type of EPUB where you like to read your books in a digital capacity. So, and an audio. So I would encourage anyone that has not already been exposed to Inclusion Uncomplicated, a transformative guide to simplify DEI, to get your copy. I would greatly appreciate your support, and I do think this would be a tremendous resource for you.
And tell me about just name the other two books because I do want to look. Y'all go buy all three of her books,
Okay,
please.
fantastic. All three can be found on Amazon, but the first one that I wrote is The Intentional Inclusionist, and it's how to grow as an inclusion minded leader. Book number 2 is called The Next Level Inclusionist. And then, of course, book number 3 is Inclusion Uncomplicated.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
Keep doing what you're doing.
Thank you.
It's important, the work you're doing, the books you're writing. This is not just your legacy, but this is also the legacy of those that come behind.
Yeah, absolutely.
People
Absolutely.
are talking about Black history. You are Black
Thank you.
history.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Hey, once again, thank you again. And my name is Carlos Walker. This is Art and Hustle, Black Authors Matter, and this is Miss Dr. Nika White. Bless.
Thank you.